Luke, somehow when I wasn't looking, you grew up. And you are incredible. Now, still gonna work hard at school even when I'm not here to bug you every day?
Of course, Jessie. Don't worry. I'll make you proud.
I know you will.
I'll never wash this face again.
On the morning of July 6th, 2019, Cameron Boyce, one of the most promising young actors of his generation, who had risen to fame in Disney Channel projects like Jessie and the Descendants franchise, and was beginning to make his mark in independent films and major studio projects, suffered a fatal epileptic seizure at his home in North Hollywood. Seizures were not new to Boyce. He had been diagnosed with epilepsy several years earlier and had since experienced periodic episodes that, while frightening, had become a part of his life. The condition shaped his adolescence in quiet but meaningful ways, limiting the carefree spontaneity of youth, sleepovers and long trips, for example, but his devoted parents did all they could to make his teenage years as normal as possible. By the time he reached adulthood, with careful medical supervision and a strict regimen of medication, Boyce was able to carve out more independence. A few months before his death, he'd moved into a modest house in North Hollywood with two of his closest friends, fellow Jessie alum Karan Brar and actress Sophie Reynolds. The three formed what they self-described as their chosen family. Their home was not the glorious residence of rising Hollywood stars, but a comfortable, unassuming place where they lived like any other young adult, sharing meals, preparing for auditions, hosting friends, and filling the nights with laughter, jokes, and conversations. But Boyce's family remained his anchor, and on the evening of July 5th, Cameron and his parents met for dinner at a local restaurant. His parents would later say everything was normal, casual, relaxed. Their son was in good spirits, and the family thoroughly enjoyed their dinner together. Cameron drove home and spoke with his roommates, Karan and Sophie, for a short while, before he went to his room, where he and his father texted for a while about the Lakers. The team's blockbuster trade for Anthony Davis was set to close the very next day. The father and son wrapped up their written conversation, and Cameron drifted off to sleep. Sometime later, though it is not known precisely when, Boyce began to seize. By early afternoon on July 6th, as the hours passed without seeing him, Karan Brar grew concerned that his longtime friend had not come out of his room. When Brar went to check on him, he found Boyce unresponsive, and he, now joined by Sophie Reynolds, called 911 and began CPR. Paramedics from the LA Fire Department arrived quickly and attempted to revive him, but their efforts were unsuccessful. At 2:35 p.m., they announced Boyce dead at the scene. In the days that followed, toxicology tests confirmed what his family already knew, that he had died from something called SUDEP, or sudden unexpected death in epilepsy, a rare but devastating outcome that tragically strikes a tiny fraction of people living with the condition. There were no drugs in his system other than his prescribed anti-seizure medication, no alcohol, no signs of recklessness or neglect. His death was classified as natural, and yet, for his parents, his sister, his friends and co-stars, and the millions of fans who had grown up with him, the suddenness of it all was nearly impossible to comprehend. Cameron Boyce's life ended quietly in his own home, surrounded by people he loved, at a moment when his career and his ambitions seemed poised to expand in every direction. Cameron Boyce was just 20 years old. I'm Jason Beckerman.
I'm Derek Kaufman.
This is Last Days. Cameron Boyce.
Before delving into Cameron Boyce's life and legacy, we wanted to pause for a minute to talk about what exactly happened to him. As noted, his cause of death was identified as SUDEP, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. This term is used when a person with epilepsy dies suddenly and unexpectedly, with no other clear explanation, much like, for example, sudden infant death syndrome, which is likewise a catch-all expression for an otherwise unexplainable death. In most cases, SUDEP is linked to a seizure, usually a generalized tonic-clonic seizure, the type that causes full-body convulsions. Doctors believe several overlapping mechanisms contribute to SUDEP. During a seizure, the brain's control over vital functions like breathing and heart rhythm can break down. Breathing may stop altogether, become obstructed if the person is face down in bed, or remain too shallow to keep oxygen levels sufficient. Seizures can also trigger dangerous arrhythmias in the heart. These problems are often magnified at night when breathing's already slower, and as was the case with Cameron Boyce, there may be no one nearby to intervene. Afterward, many people enter what's known as postictal state, an exhausted, semi-conscious recovery period, where the brain is less responsive, making it harder to recover from low oxygen or cardiac irregularities. SUDEP is rare. It occurs in about 1 in every 1,000 adults with epilepsy each year, though the risk rises for those who have frequent tonic-clonic seizures, particularly at night. Reports are that Boyce had suffered from approximately 5 seizures over the past 3 years, which isn't all that frequent, and it does not appear that Boyce's physicians considered him at an elevated risk of SUDEP. Medical researchers continue to study why and when SUDEP happens, but what is clear is that it is not caused by recklessness or neglect. It is a tragic and unpredictable complication of epilepsy, capable of cutting short the life of even young, otherwise healthy people.
Any untimely death is tragic, but for it all to befall someone as young as Boyce, with a generous and kind spirit, a world of talent, and a lifetime of success in front of him, is particularly so. And the outpouring of support for Boyce was testament to just that. Adam Sandler, who cast Boyce as his son in Grown Ups 1 and 2, and, as we'll see, became a friend and mentor to Boyce, commented, quote, "Too young, too sweet, too funny, just the nicest, most talented, and most decent kid around. He cared so much about his family, cared so much about the world. Thank you, Cameron, for all you gave to us. So much more was on the way. All our hearts are broken."
You know, I just watched the Grown Ups movies with my kids. They're great Adam Sandler movies because they're very childlike. They're not as sort of raunchy as his earlier comedies. And this kid is incredible. He plays his son, and the movie is built around the zany antics of Adam Sandler and David Spade, but the kids are kind of the anchor. You know, they're a little bit more the normal kids, but he pops off the screen. I used to watch him in Jessie. Yeah. He's just an incredible actor.
We're going to talk about this more, but and
he had such a look, too.
He had a very distinctive look. He was a superstar. He was a world-class dancer. We'll talk about that a little bit. He and was really terrific. If you remember back to Jessie, you and I both watched Jessie, me with my kids 10 years ago, you with your kids now.
That's right.
Everybody else in that show is forgettable.
Yes.
Debbie Ryan, fine actor. Peyton List has gone on to Karate Kid fame. He is unforgettable.
He's great.
Much better than the rest of the actors in the show, all due respect to them as well.
Karan Brar's pretty good, too. His buddy.
Karan Brar is actually pretty good.
Very funny.
But yes, he really did jump off of Grown Ups 1 and 2, which I hadn't seen until recently. But and by that point, I knew who he was, so it was a little bit different than seeing him as a totally unknown actor at the time.
And we'll talk about it. The Descendants was huge for him.
It really was. Peyton List, who played Boyce's sister for 4 seasons on Jessie, and as we just talked about, is more famous now from Cobra Kai, remembered Boyce as, quote, "the boy whose contagious laugh I can still hear, the boy who left everyone feeling hopeful and full of love. He taught me how to spread love and kindness more than anyone that has ever been in my life. He listened to everyone around him and inspired and pushed me to be a better person than I ever would have been without his guidance, patience, and love. There is a hole in my heart that will never heal." And Dove Cameron said, quote, "He was the most alive person I've ever known. He has inspired me to be more alive, more human, more deeply feeling. I think that's one of his legacies. He touched people in that way, in a way that I don't know anybody ever has." So I have a run-in with Cameron Boyce I want to talk to you about.
Sure.
My daughter was about 6 or 7. Siobhan, who we work with, her husband who used to work at Disney. He got us tickets backstage to the Disney Kids' Choice Awards or something like that. So we go to the award ceremony, and then we go backstage. It was actually, they rented out this little restaurant, and we go there.
This was when he was little, or Descendants?
So this is this is Descendants peak fame. This is Jessie peak fame. This is probably 10 years ago.
Yep.
And 2016, I think it was. And we go into this room, and all the Disney stars have to be there, all the kids. They don't want to be there, but they have to be there. And some are hidden in the corners, not really wanting to interact. Others are being better about it. Cameron Boyce was the biggest star in the room, I think, of all these kids, and was out shaking every person's hand. I have a picture with my daughter and him. Couldn't have been sweeter. He was 10 years ago. He would have been 26 now. He's 16 or so.
I imagine they adored Cameron Boyce. He's a bit of a heartthrob, but sort of a unique-looking kid, not like a sort of dashing.
Yes.
He had a very specific look.
So we got some people sitting in the corner, some people kind of mingling, him leaning into it. Some of the others were really awful. I'm looking at you, Wednesday Addams. You are a nasty little child, and I will never forgive her for that. My daughter loved that show that she was on, the little show or whatever it was, and went out to talk to her, and she turned a cold shoulder and gave her a nasty look. I will never watch
was
that
not nice.
Wednesday show because of that. Anyway, that's my little personal story. It's my story to tell, right?
Yeah,
But anyway, Cameron Boyce jumped out. He was so kind. And that's kind of what you get from these other people who work.
Yeah, and that warmth really, like you say it, I never met him in person, but my kids loved him because he really radiated a real warmth through. He was very funny. He had comedic timing and all that stuff, but he didn't look at a remove. He looked like a kid you could be friends with. He had those freckles, and he was just seemed like a nice kid. It's nice to hear that in reality, you had a good experience with him. Cameron Boyce's first love was dance. Growing up in Los Angeles, he began formal training at age 5 in ballet, jazz, tap, modern, hip-hop, and above all, breakdancing, thanks to the encouragement of his parents. After a preschool recital where, according to his mother, he stole the show, he became obsessed. For the next 7 years, Boyce spent an estimated 20 hours per week in the dance studio. At just 8 years old, he became a founding member of the breakdance crew X Mob, where he was known by the name Truth. The crew included 4 older kids who enforced a competitive, high-energy rehearsal environment. That physical discipline became his gateway to acting. In 2008, at 9 years old, Boyce was cast in Panic at the Disco's video for the song That Green Gentleman, and by year's end, he had landed roles in the horror film Mirrors and the techno-thriller Eagle Eye. They were small films, but Boyce showed flashes of a quick and self-assured kid who clearly felt comfortable in front of the camera. And then, in 2010, Adam Sandler cast him in the movie Grown Ups. The pairing with Sandler was natural, and there was an immediate mutual affinity between the two of them. Sandler gave Boyce a foothold in the world of big-budget comedies, and more importantly, allowed him to form a relationship with a mentor who, from that point forward, took a vested interest in the teenager's career. Sandler later cast him in Grown Ups 2, and then a movie called Hubie Halloween, and the two were in discussions for additional projects. For a young actor trying to attain comedy credibility in Hollywood, the Sandler connection was a gift, an entry point into a different orbit of comedy. And sure enough, the year after the first Grown Ups movie was released, Boyce was cast on Disney Channel's Jessie. The sitcom followed a Texas nanny, played by Debbie Ryan, hired to wrangle the 4 wildly different Ross children in their Manhattan penthouse. Boyce played Luke Ross, the swaggering middle son, with a wisecrack always at the ready and a penchant for mischief. Originally written as a quiet and introspective character, the role was rewritten entirely around Boyce after his audition, a testament to how much energy he brought into the room. Over 4 seasons and 98 episodes, Luke became one of the show's most reliable sparks, cocky but lovable, a schemer with sharp comic timing.
Jessie wasn't just another kid's show, it was one of Disney Channel's biggest hits of the decade. The series regularly drew millions of viewers per episode and ran in heavy rotation worldwide across Disney's global networks. For a generation of younger kids, the Ross kids were household names, and Boyce, with his dance interludes and scene-stealing one-liners, stood out as one of the most recognizable Disney Channel stars of his era. The fame was real. He couldn't go any place where young adults might be without being mobbed, and he became a fixture on the Disney Channel's promotional tours, award shows, and crossover specials. By the time Jessie ended in 2015, Boyce was a bona fide star with an international fan base. We talked about how, for you and me, he jumped off of the Jessie screen, just the screen in Jessie, and he sort of began to parlay that. His career is so short. I don't know if we've ever done a podcast about a star who died quite this young.
There's a real tragedy. You know, this episode's about him dying from that condition, the epileptic seizure at night. We did another episode about an epileptic seizure with FloJo. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
That is a totally different story. Yeah. We had seen, and I think about them together because it's such a rare form of death, but we had seen her greatness. And she was in the stage after her greatness. With Cameron Boyce, it's entirely opposite. He was about to start really realizing his potential. He did a lot, by the way, in 20 years. I mean, you're in Adam Sandler comedies. You're a big budget star. He was a name brand. Jessie, which both of our kids watch, which we mentioned, was built around Debbie Ryan. But the name brand star of that show for my kids, and I'm sure your kids, was Cameron Boyce.
Yeah. We typically wait in these episodes to do the counterfactual at the end, but we sort of touched on it. So let's do it.
Let's
now.
do it.
It's easy to imagine him sort of continuing to surface in Sandler's orbit, right? Sandler continues to cast people over and over.
And
again.
He's known in Hollywood as being very generous and taking his friends along. Rob Schneider, David Spade.
Right.
He keeps these guys employed, and he loved Cameron Boyce.
And he would have joined that sort of extended family of actors who appear in multiple projects. He had an HBO role, which we'll talk about in a minute, suggested more premium cable opportunities, and his indie work hinted at like film festival prestige. Few 20-year-olds really, I think, Derek, can boast the kind of spread, commercial comedies, Disney musicals, gritty indies that Cameron Boyce had at that age. And we're not just puffing him up. The credibility he had. There's some critics that lauded him in each one of these roles as being slightly different than other child actors.
There's a risk with doing this that you're going to overstate what Cameron Boyce could become, because counterfactuals are inherently hard to do. But let's think about this. Disney stars often, or not often, but can become magnificent actors and stars in their own right. Think of Ryan Gosling. He was on the Mickey Mouse Club. This guy is one of the most serious, respected actors in Hollywood. Cameron Boyce was on that trajectory, and he really sort of had something. If you watch his old movies, Grown Ups, the comedic timing, you can't teach that kind of stuff. He jumped off the screen. He had a very unique look. I think he could have really gone somewhere.
The direct parallel is Lindsay Lohan. Now, her career got sidetracked, obviously, into drugs and abuse and things like that. But they both had freckle faces.
Specific looks.
Very specific looks. But let's never forget, sleep on Lindsay Lohan as an actress.
One of the most talented young
One of the most
stars.
talented. She was carrying movies at the age of like 14, 15 years old, right? Cameron Boyce was in that same vein, and the counterfactual is pretty easy to see, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully he doesn't go down the drug abuse. He was 20 and hadn't shown that, and he had this condition. But does he not die that night? And that it's not like it was inevitable, right? Most people people with epilepsy don't die of this, obviously.
That's right.
So there's this is one of the saddest counterfactuals. We don't have to imagine too hard to think about what it could have been like.
And I want to add one more point about Cameron Boyce that differentiates him from someone like Lindsay Lohan, who became so enmeshed with her troubles and the drunk driving and things of that nature.
A bit of nastiness
to her that people weren't really rooting for her at some point in her career. They were rooting against her. Cameron, on the other hand, was so respected. You had that interaction with him where there was a real kindness. He was very respected for his professionalism and beloved for his generosity on set. Kenny Ortega called him, quote, the most generous, loving, inspired, imaginative, kind person, and said if he wasn't in the mirror working on something to improve for himself, he was helping someone else come over a breakthrough or a weakness. I think that's an essential sort of, people who knew him knew that you'd be rooting for him. So he had both talent and he would have had the industry behind him. He had a look. I really think this counterfactual, he could have soared to great, great heights.
So when Jessie ends, Disney is not about to let him go easily. They hired him to voice the titular character in Jake and the Neverland Pirates, fronted the series' gamer's guide to pretty much everything, and became a cornerstone of Kenny Ortega, we just talked about, his blockbuster 3-installment Descendants franchise. He played Carlos DeVille, the son of Cruella, and he turned in what could have been a one-note role into a real fan favorite. His dance background made him indispensable in Ortega's choreographed set pieces. Have you ever seen these movies?
These movies are so ridiculous. They're the offspring of the famous Disney villains. Yeah. So he's Cruella's son. He's amazing in it.
He is amazing. It was my least favorite thing my kids watched as kids. I had to watch those movies.
It's so silly, the musical, but they love it.
Ortega would later call Boyce his muse, a rare acknowledgement that Boyce was more than just a cog in the Disney machine. He was part of its creative engine. By the time he hit his late teens, Boyce was ready for new territory. He anchored Runt, an indie drama about a bullied teen pushed towards violence. The film itself drew mixed reviews, but Boyce's performance did not. Critics noted his restraint and depth, praising how he avoided cliché in a part that could easily have slipped into melodrama. He next booked a role in HBO's Mrs. Fletcher, a comedy drama led by Kathryn Hahn, and joined the cast of Paradise City, a streaming series about the dark underbelly of the music industry. It was in this latter role, which would be his last, in which it became clear he had become a serious actor with serious aspirations.
Why are you calling Pantheon?
What'd you say, sweetie?
I saw the call logs, Mom. Why are you calling my dad's office?
It's nothing.
It's bad enough I have to deal with the stigma of being a bastard son, okay? Why would you call him?
People magazine described Boyce in Paradise City as a, quote, one-of-a-kind spectacular talent and one of a small group of Disney alumni capable of making the leap into serious, long-form careers. He wasn't leaning on nostalgia or franchise loyalty. He was starting the next, brighter chapter of his professional life.
But just as his career was taking off, he suddenly was forced to confront a formidable foe. At age 16, he experienced his first seizure, followed by a second one a year later, which led to his diagnosis. However, doctors apparently offered little clarity or expressed any real urgency. His father, Victor, later said, quote, a doctor handed me a pamphlet like something you'd pick up on the bus. Very general information. Over the next 3 years, Boyce had only a handful of seizures, which apparently did not raise concern that his condition might be life-threatening. He continued to juggle filming, dancing, and traveling for work and pleasure as though nothing was amiss. The Boyces thought the medication was working and, according to his mother, managed everything as normal. But while they may have lived as normal a life as possible, they also guarded the reality of his condition from his coworkers and friends, not to mention the studio bosses who were backing his projects. Even in the wake of his passing, the revelation that he had epilepsy came as a total shock. According to his mother, had they known the severity of his condition, they may have been more open. We weren't alarmed, she said, because nobody made us feel alarmed about it. We just lived our life. Indeed, his father, Victor, said after his death, quote, "We were clueless, completely clueless. The first time we heard the term SUDEP is when the coroner told us that's what took our son." It's incredibly sad to hear their response to this because you can imagine it, right? You can imagine sort of an offhand diagnosis. This is something he'll live with. It'll be a nagging thing in his life.
Take the medication, he'll be okay.
He took the medication. He continued living his life. He was dancing. A grueling schedule. You have to wonder if the grueling schedule of being an actor and a dancer and so talented had some sort of impact on his epilepsy. I don't know enough about the disorder, but it's just incredibly sad because it seemed like a nagging thing.
But SUDEP statistically only occurs in 1 in 1,000 people with epilepsy, and typically it occurs in people who suffer chronic epileptic seizures. He had 5 in 3 years.
Which is not a large number.
Not a large number. Many people suffer them with great regularity, and those are the people that raise more concerns. They may be subject to this. They have monitors. They sleep in the same room as their parents because you don't die right away from it. You seize, and then what happened now is obviously he's living on his own in his own room, and nobody's there to hear it happen. And
so it doesn't sound like they're blaming the doctors for not raising the alarm bells given the status of his condition, five seizures.
They did an interview with, I think it was today, maybe Good Morning America that I watched. It was in the immediate aftermath. They were very sad and angry, and I think at that moment they were sort of, as you would, sort of blaming everybody and themselves and Cameron, and not Cameron, but themselves certainly, and the doctors and everybody else. But there's no one to blame. It's one of these terrible, tragic events that befell such a great kid. It's incredibly sad. Karan Brar, Boyce's co-star, roommate, and closest friend, and the person who discovered him on the day he died, spoke movingly about the depth of their friendship and the devastation of his loss. Quote, "I miss his laughter a lot. You could pick him out of a crowd because his laugh was so distinct and so genuine. I think losing Cameron shifted everything in my life on its axis. And that was incredibly devastating. You were the greatest thing to have ever happened to me. I love you so much, Cam."